We do have some code improvements too. Probably this is one of the bigger ones, the new inheritance model. If you remember, we with data manager, with record objects, with structure objects, you could create, child classes that inherit from parents. But the problem is that it was kind of tough to get those customizations to work inside the API itself, which meant that, if you had a nested relationship and you wanted a record to work in a customized way, like 3 levels deep in a relationship, really couldn't do that well. And then we had kind of an interesting way of using shadow copying to get structure customizations in the API. So we decided to move to something a bit simpler, which is what we call the core object factory. So you can see in our core API, it's in utilities, core object factory. We have a core class, a core functionality, that which has functionality for creating a new record object, a new record search, a new process instance object, a new instance step object, content pages, structure elements. Section objects are now inheritable. Some of these are overridden, as you can see. Create new report object. Reports, maybe you want to use the standard querying, but you have customized output. That's now an inheritable object. Create new user object in case you had extra properties you wanted to have there. And essentially, we have that. So this is the uncustomized version. And then in LeapSeed Common C, you can see this is where we now do, okay, well, create a new record object, looks at the section, looks at the URL, and based on that, it'll create the custom objects with the business logic, for everything that rules can't do. Right now, here's, let's see if we have a couple other examples. This one is section objects are not customizable, so you can actually create a new section object. In this case, here's our blog. If we go to the definition there, we can see what it's doing. So does a little update to the search page. What you'll find is that now that the section object is inheritable, there's just a lot. You can do a lot deeper business logic customization than you could do on record, because section is used on the search page, on the results page. It's used everywhere. So that's handy to have. And then what you might notice is that as a standard class that's defined in the API, if we look at, you'll see that a lot of functions now actually pass in the factory object. So maybe not. So if we look at, say, the section object, they create new section object functionality. You'll see that I'm actually looking for one that actually passes an active factory. Essentially, on the front page of LeapSeed page, in the LeapSeed page file, we declare a class of instance of that class called active factory. And then throughout the platform, this is what we use to create all the objects. If we do a search through the entire section, through the entire file system, you'll see that actually within the LeapSeed code base, in general, we don't instantiate objects by the new keyword anymore. We call active factory to create new record object and such. And for objects that might be creating their own objects, say the section class, we often have the factory class actually, it's not passed in, but it's certainly used when creating the inside the customized version. I'm trying to find an example where that is the case. Maybe instance objects sounds like a good place. place. Okay, well, the actual constructors of the objects themselves, like if we go here, you'll see that active factory is often part of the constructor parameters, because if an object itself might be creating LeapSeed objects inside, you still want that instantiation functionality to work. So essentially what the object factory does is when it creates objects, it assigns itself to that parameter, and that becomes the factory object inside the object that might be creating more LeapSeed objects. Hence, any customizations you've done to that class and how records are created are propagated inside the API. So it works n levels deep. It's certainly a lot. It's much easier to make custom logic now that the functionality propagates that deep, or the custom functionality. So yeah, essentially, the use of inherited classes are no longer restricted, and we also just increased the number. The record object wasn't inheritable before, the user object wasn't inheritable before. There's a lot more, with all the usability and configuration things, we certainly added code capabilities to it as well. Just a couple other, cleanup things. With the code improvements, we upgraded the CK editor components to version 3.5.2. Probably has a higher version now that it's been released. Actually, it's pretty easy to drop in later versions, but this is the shipping version. We upgraded Scriptaculous to version 1.9.0 that handled some of the IE9 issues that we started seeing. And we upgraded the ASPOS components to ASPOS cells 5.3.3 and ASPOS words 9.7.0. Of course, if you use the platform and you want to use the ASPOS capabilities, you'd buy the components and register them. They're great components. I highly recommend them. Other things worth noting, we still use include files when we're referencing whole pages, but include files that were used to for part of the functionality that's been completely removed from the platform now. The data manager functionality on the front page of the data manager files sections. We used to have some include files that provided functionality. That's been removed. That just makes it much easier to actually load pages in Visual Studio, and IntelliSense pretty much now universally works. File extension configuration, not quite an include file, but that's now part of web config instead of having a separate INI file, and that's part of the settings page. One thing worth noting too is just content manager. The amount of ASPX files used to handle actions has been significantly